So you've done your scope 1, you've done your scope 2, you've done your electricity, gas, and you've done your company fuel. Brilliant. What about scope 3? Scope 3 is where it starts getting a bit more involved, but it's okay as long as you follow some simple principles, and that's what we're going to do now. So hang on tight and let's get in there and see what's involved. Scope 3 emissions are the indirect emissions. They're not emissions you make yourself, like for example gas, electricity or aircon leaks, hope you don't have many of those, or any sort of company fuel you've got. Those are things you emit yourself. Scope 3 is what you cause other people to emit. And a good example of that could be you take a taxi ride from A to B. You don't emit any carbon from A to B, the taxi does, but you are making someone else emit it on your behalf, and that will be the taxi, whoever owns that taxi or runs that taxi, okay? And so, you got to look at everything that you cause to happen through the activities you do. That could be a massive problem. It could be a huge problem. So what we do is we break it down into sections and stages, and second, we put some boundaries in place just so we can sort it out, just so we can get a number. If we didn't do that, you'll find that the problem's so huge, you'd be forever calculating it. So put some boundaries, put some steps in place. I'm going to run through those with you now. I want to give you an example of the sort of problems that we're facing. Let's take a sales conference in Berlin. Let's say you've got 10 staff going to the conference. You might say, well, what's the carbon footprint of that? Well, you say, well, you could say it's the 10 times the petrol or diesel that these sort of folk took to get from, where they live to the airport. Then you've got the flights themselves, what the jet fuel is going to be for taking them up, across, and then down again into their destination. And then maybe you've got some sort of diesel, petrol taking them to their hotel at the other end, okay? That's okay, that's at least it's a start. But that ignores things like, well, what happens if they had a meal on the plane? Well, what about the carbon emissions of creating that meal? Someone had to cook it. Someone had to ship it from, where it's manufactured or where it's cooked to the plane. Similarly, if they have any meals at the conference, say they sit down on the first day and they have a big slap up, well, again, same deal. Someone's got to cook that meal. So that's the scope 3 emissions. You could say, okay, well, we'll start including those in. Say, well, hang on a second though. Someone had to make the plane. What about all the carbon emissions associated with making a plane, or maintaining a plane, or making the car that they drove to the airport in, or making the taxi, or paving the roads, or painting the lines? You can see that this is a never-ending problem. It can be, you can go on as much as you want. How long's a bit of string? So what we do is we take a look at all the different possible things you could include, and to start with, for net zero, out of all 15 possible scope 3 elements, we bin 9 of them and we just concentrate on 6. Yeah. Second, the way we look at those 6 is pretty regimented. Okay, we just do this, which sounds like a complete cop-out until you start doing it yourself and realize even with those 6, there's enough work in there to get your teeth stuck into. So the 6 we concentrate on, the 6 we sort of say, right, okay, these are the ones we are going to think about, are the deliveries. So how much carbon is emitted getting the deliveries to you, and similarly, how much carbon do you emit by getting whatever you make, manufacture, or ship out to consumers, to your clients. And if you're a service business, that's probably not a lot. But if you're shipping out physical goods, that can be considerable. Then you look at what waste you generate. Again, if you're in an office, it's not really that relevant, but if you are in a manufacturing operation, then yes, waste is a definite thing for you. Then we look at business travel. Okay, so we've got deliveries in, deliveries out, waste, business travel. That's planes, trains, automobiles, broadly speaking. Okay, commuting, how much carbon is emitted by your staff getting from where they live into work each day. Okay, and then finally, supply chain. And again, the supply chain is more relevant if you're in a resale business or a manufacturer business, where you just cannot avoid looking at your supply chain. Okay, so they're the sorts of things we're going to be talking about with scope 3. It is a complicated problem. Now, out of all the ones I've said, by the way, supply chain is the hardest out of those group of 6. But by putting in some standardized methodologies Yeah, by looking at things in a sort of a specific way and putting boundaries in place, you can get to grips with the problem and you can come up with an answer. Okay, so look, I hope that was useful. I'm going to reach down here, just grab this. This is my book, Net Zero for Business. If you like the sort of thing I've been talking about, if you kind of want to work out your carbon footprint as a business and reduce it down, Net Zero for Business. It's available on Amazon. Love it if you bought a copy. Even happier if you give it a good review. And this is a not-for-profit book, so I don't get any money, I don't get any profit from the book itself. It just covers the production costs. But this is my way of saying to you, look, we need to do something about the environment. We need to do something about the climate problems we've got at the moment. Let's tackle it together and hear my view on how you can go about that. Okay, hope that was useful. See you next time.